I'm Laura McNamara at the 2026 Fuel Ethanol Workshop in St. Louis, Missouri. Joining me now is Troy Bredenkamp. Would you go ahead and introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, Laura, Troy Bredenkamp with the Renewable Fuels Association, Senior Vice President, Government and Public Affairs.
And here at the Fuel Ethanol Workshop, you were on the executive panel discussing current events in the industry. What were some of the main topics you addressed?
Well, obviously, we spent a lot of time talking about year-round E15. We just had the successful vote in the U.S. House. Me and my fellow panelists talked about how we were able to get that done over on the House side. Clearly a team effort, took everyone kind of working together to secure the 218 votes, and then we all talked then about what it's going to take to get it done over on the Senate side. That was probably about half the panel discussion.
Correct. And what do you think are some of the key highlights for getting it done on the Senate side? I know you're expecting a little bit of pushback.
Yeah, there's definitely a different dynamic when you move over to the Senate. We most likely will not be looking at a floor vote or a standalone kind of a scenario. But I said that over on the House side. We weren't looking at necessarily a standalone scenario there either. Some of the things that are positive about the Senate, we have a majority leader who is very much in support of E15 and ethanol in John Thune. So that's very much to our advantage. One thing to our disadvantage is the majority whip, John Barrasso of Wyoming, is not necessarily a fan. So there are some obstacles that we're going to have to overcome. The other thing is that the opposition in that mid-side refining sector, their opposition gets concentrated when you move over to the Senate. When you only need a couple senators to really muck up any advancement in a piece of legislation like you do in the Senate, then they obviously have a lot more control and a lot more power than they did even on the House side. So there's likely going to need to be further negotiation, further changes in the language in order to get a true package done on the Senate side. Then, obviously, is the need for some kind of a vehicle to attach it to. And when you look down the Senate agenda, there just doesn't seem to be much that is coming along. It could be the National Defense Authorization Act. It could be a farm bill. I don't think it's going to be that necessarily. And then you're probably looking at some kind of a must-pass appropriations package, maybe year-end, fiscal year-end September, to get them into the next federal fiscal year. So those are the kinds of options, but we'll be looking at any and all opportunities to get it done yet this year.
And you even pointed out that there were specific candidates in the largest ethanol producing state that you feel couldn't give 2 cents about ethanol. So you feel like there's a lot of work to do.
There is a lot of work to do, but they're also realizing that this is an issue that absolutely needs to get done. There is some key races in the U.S. Senate this year in the Midwest: Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, Minnesota, Michigan, Ohio, where Republican and Democrat candidates could benefit from having this year-round E15 issue passed before the midterms. Both could take victory, both could campaign on it. So I do see this being a campaign issue, something that both sides could run in support of. And I think that bodes well for us to hopefully get something done before the midterms. Even those that are in opposition from oil-producing states realize that this could be something that impacts their ability to maintain the majority on the Senate side. So even they are waking up to the idea of getting something done on E15. They just want to make sure it doesn't impact their small refining sector. That's where I believe there's probably going to need to be some language changes made before we actually get this over the finish line.
Yeah, you even mentioned that in Congress it's kind of become a little unpredictable. And like with the redistricting palooza, it's kind of open terrain, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I said, a year ago I would have never said that the Senate would be in play this cycle, but now with some changes in voter attitude and clearly I think the president taking a very unpopular position and war, that is having an impact on voter attitude. High gas prices clearly is not going to be a positive for Republicans heading into November. But you weigh that against what is happening with the redistricting happening on the Senate side, and then the recent Supreme Court decision that throws out the ability to district to redraw districts based on race. That's going to redraw a lot of districts in the southern boundary states, and that could, in theory, pick up 10 to 12 seats for Republicans, ones that they would have most likely lost. So there is a scenario where, you could have, something that most people had already written off as the House being lost to the Republicans. They could, in theory, keep the House and then lose the Senate, which is a scenario that I don't think anyone was contemplating even a few months ago.
Absolutely. Another point you brought up was just kind of, it's right now between the big refiners and the small refiners. You said they both kind of proverbially have a gun to the head, and it's going to be who acts.
Right. No, and we have felt that way for quite a while. Right now we have had a much better working relationship with the large refineries. There is some what we feel is common sense small refinery exemption reform that they are asking for. And so that's why we have been working primarily with them and paired that up with the E15 language. But they have made it abundantly clear to us if their package is not included with the E15 language, they're not going to support E15. And then the other side of the equation is the small refiners. They don't like the large refinery language on small refinery exemption. And so they want that out, and they won't support it unless it's taken out. And then on E15, they would want to see different kinds of reforms made to the renewable fuel standard. So we basically have different sectors of the refining community wanting completely different things, all holding E15 hostage until they get what they want. And it's a very frustrating position, but we've been here for several years. At the end of the day, all we want to have is the ability to, consumer choice, consumers to be able to choose year-round E15. It doesn't seem like it's a lot to ask, but I think refiners know that it's our number one ask, and so they want to extract as much out of that as possible before they allow us to have it.
Do you see any compromise coming down the pipeline in the future?
I do. I do. I think you're going to have a scenario here play out in the Senate where I know conversations are happening even as I speak, member to member on the Senate side amongst members that you wouldn't likely expect to be talking to each other about E15, trying to find a deal to get this done, something that all sides can agree to. I think from our side, we have laid our cards on the table. We want E15 done from a small refinery exemption change perspective. We have told them what we can accept, what we cannot accept. And as long as they stay within those parameters, the refineries can figure out what they can do within those parameters, then figure it out. But it's really incumbent upon them to figure out their side of the equation, and then come to us once they've collectively figured it out, and then we'll come back together and move a package forward. But it feels a little bit like we're negotiating with ourselves until the refining community figures out what they're doing first. And so that's, I think, the step that we're at right now.
There was talk about the strong RVOs and how that's been a positive, but you had a big warning of saying, well, look, when you've got something successful, the naysayers come out of the woodwork.
They really do, and we're starting to see it right now. These are the most robust renewable volume obligations ever put forth and finalized by the federal government, 26 and 27. And we are in a position right now that if the biofuel community does not step up and produce enough biofuel to meet the RIN demand that renewable volume obligation requires, then you're going to have a lot of people saying, I told you so, you guys couldn't make that much biofuel, and then they're going to ask for the federal government to lower that standard. And that would be a worst case scenario if that was, here you have the Trump administration just setting the highest standard, and then now they have to give an exemption from that standard because the biofuel community hasn't made enough RIN. They haven't made enough fuel to produce enough RINs to meet the standard that the Trump administration set. That's not a good look for us. So we need to do our due diligence. We have to double down and make sure that we're producing the fuel and that we're meeting our end of the deal. And we also have to make sure that we are defending the RFS against those opponents that are going to be looking at any and all opportunity to poke holes and to create strife within that program and try and tear it down. So that's going to be job number one for the RFS proponents, to make sure that we don't go backwards now that we have the strongest RVO in history.
Yeah, so the Trump administration kind of set you guys up to bat, but you got to make sure you hit the home run. So.
That is exactly right.
Yeah. So also, I know that it was speaking about exports, and that the renewable fuel sector feels good and strong, but they don't want to sit on their laurels and get too comfortable. You have to know that that's a market that's not always going to be there.
That's true. If we don't do our legwork and continue to advance that market, then we're really not going to be growing. I mean, we have had stagnant growth in the U.S. Biofuel market for quite a while. Really, the growth opportunity has been export, and it's grown year over year for the last 3 years. And it continues to show huge opportunity. While we've had the Trump administration, there has been a pause or a even slight retraction in the push toward lower carbon fuel. That hasn't happened globally. From a global demand for low carbon fuel, that continues. And so U.S. ethanol has a big opportunity. There's a big demand for lower carbon fuel elsewhere. We can meet that demand, not only low carbon, but low cost. And we're starting to see that. Canada continues to be our number one trading partner. We just had a favorable ruling in a Brazil case where we hope to get Brazil back to buying more U.S. ethanol. Asia's got a huge opportunity to purchase more. And then we've got opportunities in India and in Europe. So everywhere we turn internationally, there is opportunity for the U.S. ethanol industry to export more, and that is something that we are going to be pushing for, because once again, without E15 certainty, from a domestic perspective, we are in somewhat of a stagnant marketplace, so the export market is really a place to grow things overall.
And right now, you're doing a lot here at the Fuel and Ethanol Workshop. Tell us a little bit about some of the ways you're connecting with producers here. How are you showcasing some of RFA's programs, such as young professionals, women, and veterans in the industry?
Yeah, we have a whole litany of programs when we come to the Fuel Ethanol Workshop. I'm usually on a policy panel highlighting what's going on from a legislative perspective. We have a group of veterans for renewable fuels. We usually have a program for them. They go out and do something fun. I know we had a women's program yesterday where they all did Pilates, I believe, and that was a big hit. We have a booth and we invite people in. I think today we have Ozzie Smith. Those that are baseball fans will certainly remember the Wizard of Oz. And he's going to be in for a couple hours signing baseballs just to highlight, since we're in St. Louis, obviously he was a lifelong St. Louis Cardinal. We just try and make whatever connections we can while we're here. We have receptions, making those connections not only with members but with prospective members. We're always looking to make sure that we're putting RFA's best foot forward, and we certainly do a great job of that here at the Fuel Ethanol Workshop.
And I saw the line already growing quite long for Ozzie Smith, the St. Louis baseball legend here, so that's exciting.
Yes, it is. Very exciting. This is something we don't typically do, but Again, when you're in St. Louis, you take that kind of an opportunity, and I think it'll be a great draw and a great opportunity for people to meet a living legend.
And I guess the final word too is like you were urging people to just step into the fight, make the voice heard.
Absolutely. You know, from an E15 perspective, the fight is only half over, and it's going to get harder as we go through the Senate. So it's incumbent upon all of us to work together as a team to get this finally pushed over the hump into the president's desk. So yes, it's going to require people to make phone calls, contact their members of Congress, urging them to get it done. And we'll be calling on members and non-members alike to continue the push and to help us get this finally over the hump.
Well, great. Thank you so much for your time today, Troy.